Hi, folks. Jake and I again. We got a couple of topics we want to talk about. They're kind of separate from one another. They're as far apart as New York is from Los Angeles. Want to talk about bridges and school shootings. First, the bridges. Michigan has two key bridges. One in the north that links Upper Michigan with Lower Michigan. It's called the Mackinac Bridge. It's the longest suspended bridge in the Western Hemisphere. Was when it was built and still is. Interesting thing about that bridge, I've crossed it twice, or at least twice, during my travels from Canada to Cape Cod. But my math teacher back in Provincetown High School in the 50s was one of the design engineers for that bridge. He did most of his works in the late 30s, early 40s, and because of the war and other factors, the bridge didn't get completed until the mid-50s when he was teaching math in Provincetown. And the reason why he was teaching math and not continuing with his engineering degree was that his eyesight had diminished to the point he was wearing the old Coke thick glasses so he could see. And he was remarkable, even though his vision was very limited, how well he could use his hearing. I remember once slipping out of a chair by accident trying to reach for a note, and he was able to make a comment about my athletic ability of sitting in the chair. Kids had a lot of laugh in that class that day, but he was quite a math teacher. He taught me things at the time I didn't realize until I went off to university. Now, the second bridge that is Michigan's lifeline is one that goes from the Detroit area to the Windsor, Canadian area. The bridge was built in 1929. It's called the Ambassador Bridge. And it is privately owned, and the toll income is long since paid for the cost of the bridge. Well, in this century, the bridge is not quite adequate to handle the flow that goes between Canada and Michigan. So Canada decided they wanted to buy the Ambassador Bridge and improve it. They offered $2 billion, but the family that owned it only wanted $3 billion, and Canada thought the cost for refurbishing it was going to be way out of line. So they began planning to build their own bridge. In 2012, they put forth some plans, and in 2016, President Trump agreed with it. The bridge was to be 4-lane wide, and it was going to be a very modern bridge, capable of a lot of things. It was going to be built entirely with Canadian funds, approximately 6 billion Canadian and a little over 4 billion American. And that once it was constructed, the revenue would be shared 50% between both countries, 50-50. Everything seemed okay, but then the family that owned the Ambassador Bridge, and particularly the senior member, appealed to Trump not to have the bridge go forward because they were going to lose quite a bit of revenue. The Ambassador Bridge would probably reduce by about 75% the traffic, where the other bridge would get 75% or even maybe more. So they laid some charges. They went some lawsuits both in Michigan and Canada and lost them all. So the bridge in 2018 was under construction. As Jake said, you don't like that story about the bridge, eh? Well, hang in there for a little bit longer. Bottom line is the bridge was built and is scheduled to be opened later actually I think in April. But Trump now has threatened to not give the final approvals. And it's purely a graft situation. The gentleman that originally didn't want the bridge has died, but the family is continuing on with all their objections. So we'll see what happens. Interesting story, and that, again, is the Ambassador Bridge is another bridge that we've crossed. And this was back in the 80s, and it is still, by that time, was still kind of showing its age. Needs major overhaul and widening, to be honest with you. That's the story about Bridges and Trump. But yesterday, we had a shooting. It was an American-style shooting. A young person, 18 years of age, came into a remote school in Tumbler Ridge. After having killed his mother and a sibling, walked into the school and killed 6 more people and wounded 27 others. Eventually he killed himself, or she killed himself. I know something about Tumbler Ridge. When I was an administrator in Spirit River, we took our basketball team to Tumbler Ridge one year. It had just recently opened. Tumbler Ridge is a community that grew around because of coal mining. The Japanese had given them a 15-year contract in the early 80s. And the coal mines was what developed the town. And that went on for a number of years. And then as the coal mines was getting near the end of the 15 years, another remarkable thing happened in the Tumbler Ridge area. They discovered dinosaur footprints and a number of fossils, including fish species. Sorry about that. And as a result, it's been declared a world recognized site, a United Nations recognized site for that. And there is even now a dinosaur museum in Tumbler Ridge. Recently, with the Alberta encouraging the reconstitution of the coal mines, the mining industry has picked up, and Tumbler Ridge is on a growth spot. Now they have 2 schools, an elementary and a senior secondary school, grades 7 to 12. It's a 7 and 12 school. When we went there, it was purely brand new, shiny floors and beautiful facilities. And the people were great. These are hard-working people. They are salt of the earth people. They probably would be similar to the attitude of those that live in West Virginia. They're coal miners, and they're proud people. Evidently, there's one individual who quit school when he was 14. They were 14. And had a lot of problems. Got to a breaking point. Killed his mother and his brother. And went into the school and did the damage that he did. We may never know what led the individual to do this specific incident at this particular time. But it does say a lot about our society that has individuals thinking that this kind of outlet can solve their problems. Now, shooting is something I've been aware of. I was an administrator for over 38 years, and there were 2 instances that came to mind. In 1989, I was working on my master's with a group of teachers and other administrators. And one of them was the principal from a place called Manning, Alberta. The funny thing about that is my daughter would, 30 years later, begin teaching in a school near Manning. But he was the principal, and he and I were working together on a project. Then one day he got a phone call. He left. I never saw him again. What had happened is he had recently suspended a student for behavior not becoming. The student went home and killed himself. And my friend took it personally. He became distraught. He left the master's program. He resigned as principal. And then he moved. I don't know where. I never heard from him again. The other incidents occurred in a place called Taber, Alberta. A student walked in, shot and killed another student. The principal had been my phys ed teacher a few years before. I knew him, and he too took it very hard that someone that they didn't know, didn't recognize, could do something like that. So I can understand what's going through the staff and the students in Tumbler Ridge. It's something that it's so hard to understand, sometimes so hard to cope with. And unfortunately, over the years, the media has become pretty good at covering it. They cover these stories, especially the stories of the victims and their families. Some of those are good. And then the media moves on, because another major event will occur. And so it seems it's rare that we see the aftermath of the carnage done months and even years after a tragic event. Perhaps the best thing that has occurred in the last few years is that some of the students that have been witnesses of these tragedies are now making their mark in society. They're now in their 20s, early 30s. Some of them have come out and speaked up for gun laws, reduce violence in that regard, from better mental health facilities. Some have even become politicians and are working at that end. They become the steady drop of water that eventually will bring change. In this incident in Tumbler Ridge, perhaps the way Canada is covering this tragedy is a lesson for the U.S. There were no panels debating the tragic. There are few interviews of survivors. And it seems that patience, waiting for the authorities to present the facts, is the standard mode of operation. Compassion and decency seems to be the first priority, not sensationalism. And maybe that's the way it should be. Well, it's a tragic day. It's the middle of the week. See you on the good side. Bye.